So this is my first live stream. There's an enormous amount of knowledge and intelligence in understanding what the satellite system is doing to interfere with speech, and really more than that, thought. But that's more than can be covered in a single episode. So in general, because I'm so experienced with it, I probably won't stop for mild jamming or minor forced speech alterations. But if it's more significant, I'll stop and I'll talk about it briefly. Okay, let's hop on the horse. So let's see if this is working here. Marcus Aurelius, he became the Emperor of Rome around 161 AD. He also wrote a series of books, lessons that he had learned. He called the collection of books To Himself, as if it was written to himself. These books were written in the ancient Greek language, and about 150 years earlier, the Bible was also being written, or at least it was being translated into the ancient Greek language. Because of the language overlap and the relative near time range, the two sets of books can be cross-checked against each other to help better understand what they were experiencing at the time. Today, I'm going to be focusing on one of the words that shows up in both sets of books. The word in ancient Greek is arete. It means virtue. Arete also means excellence, being the best at something, being the best at anything. In ancient Hebrew, about 1,000 years earlier, there was a similar word that meant glory or praise. This word also seems to be related to energy, strength, and clarity, and possibly also related to eating certain foods. In ancient Greek, another similar word is aretos, which was a word that was used to describe kings, a word that meant pleasing and agreeable, and accommodating to everybody or everyone in all respects. It seems to me that arete was a way of describing good stuff. It's like honey. It's like the bee's knees. Marcus Aurelius opens his first book of excellence with a series of best of summary lessons that he had learned from others. Opening up Marcus's first book of excellence, he starts off with speaking of his grandpop. He says, "I remember his integrity and how big and strong he was." And he speaks of his mom. He says, "I remember how generous she was, how she would avoid wrongdoings, even the thought of them." And about his great-grandfather, he didn't even go to school, and yet he was such a good teacher. And from one of his teachers, Diognetus, in life, avoid empty enthusiasm, tolerate plain speak, and start writing from an early age. And from another, Rusticus, understand the idea of wanting to see things be correct within your own character. And do not allow yourself to become diverted into nonsense, and do not present glorified stories. Have a kind disposition and hold on to intuitive concerns for your friends, and remain agreeable so that the pleasure of conversation is greater than flattery. And from Alexander, never without essential cause suggest that you are too busy to converse with someone. Never place the pressure of circumstance above people. And from Severus, love the freedom of the topic of any and every conversation, and hold on to this love. From Maximus, hold on to methods that defeat panic. Nothing should be hurried. Never short of resource, never cringy, never suspicious in the generosity of good works, intentionally choosing the path rather than being forced. Choose the path that belittles no one and proceed with pleasurable honor. And from Marcus's father, be gentle, be immovable, adhere to decisions only after full consideration. Have a ready ear for anyone with a proposal, particularly for proposals that are for the common good. Give everyone their due credit, and stay focused and deliberate and persistent. Never be satisfied with a first impression, and never leave uncertainty prematurely. And recognize that each individual is his or her own master in all things. And finally, avoid the vulgar and newfangled and intentionally tangled things. Marcus felt that these lessons should be practiced and at all times adhered to. And the result of these lessons was that it led to being a man of mellow wisdom and of mature experience, things that are beyond flattery. These things add up to arete, which means virtue. More recently, it was expressed that in a non-corrupt system, the king or leader must know to step down when they are no longer meeting the needs of the people. For example, to never without essential cause suggest that you are too busy to converse with someone. The more recent laws were written several hundred years ago regarding the failure to relinquish power, yet this is the situation that we find ourselves in. Initially, it seemed that the satellite systems were being used to steal businesses and to steal intellectual property via remote spying. But over time, it became more clear that they were working to increase the capacity to misuse the weapons. So much so that it was becoming obvious that their end game included gaining control over people in mass numbers and gaining more control over an individual than an individual has over themselves. Even worse, as I started catching on, they set out to gain control over my ability to hold on to these discoveries. Essentially, it became a 24/7 battle. Days and weeks would go by, little to no sleep. Prolonged sleep deprivation was destroying my memory of things that I know are basic and good. And thank God that I had developed good writing skills, because documentation turned out to be the only way to recall, and turned out to be one of the ways to defeat their increasing leverage. So anyways, one day in my notes, I wrote, for an example, I wrote, another EM pulse was fired in, a crushing hit. It travels right through your body like a hot butter knife slicing through the top of your head. I get the sense that they are trying to take ownership over everything that I am. I can't even imagine how it could be considered as something other than wrongful, corrupt, and inhuman. Well, before I turn back, I've got one story that I want to tell you about. About 40 years ago, some of the same people were using satellite systems to capture communications between people, and then altering the communications in midstream so that what the speaker was saying was not what the person on the other end of the communication was hearing. This method was used by the generals in one army to help defeat an opposing army. Basically, the generals on the opposing side or opposing army were giving orders to their people. But the orders that those people were receiving were under false impression and were actually coming from the generals in the opposing army by way of capturing the communications, altering them in midstream, and then sending out the altered communications. Well, similar tactics are now being used against our own people who live in the cities. the cities that we are entrusted to protect. And of all things that are important to me, I truly hope with all of my heart that we will not burn out the last of our resources before the individuals behind these corrupt activities can be replaced by persons with a higher level of virtue, a higher level of arete. These events have been a significant burden. I know these were things that no one should have been made to bear, and seeming much less like the blessing of new technology and more like activities that are evolving in a direction that is better described as an intent to return to a state of slavery. Part of the solution seems to be making the story known. But for now, since there's a lot to cover, and there's even more to just telling the story, we'll leave that for another day. Today, the kids are arriving back at the island, back from saving the citizens in the city, from the wrongful activities of the satellite tyrants. And so, we have a feast to prepare before they arrive. And so I'm going to head back down to the pier and get back to work. And, well, this is the first day of Warriors Island. Thank you.